the last few conferences, we've tried to bring in some expert outside thinking from, not to do with the daily grind of farming or regulation or environment and such like. The next speaker is one of those types of people. We're thinking he's going to inject some new thinking and inspiration from outside. So Bruce Cotterill is the man's name. He's from Auckland, but don't hold that again. No, he's from Mount Maunganui originally. Sorry, Bruce. He's a transformational leader, and he's got extensive experience across a whole range of industries, particularly real estate, media, financial services. As CEO, he's led turnarounds in all sorts of businesses, including Colliers, ACP Magazines, and Canterbury International. Amongst all that, he's still found time to get married and stay married, apparently, Bruce. He's got 2 kids, and he's a keen swimmer. So thank you, Bruce.
The speaker's in a different position to the last speaker, and you don't know where to look. And your business is in a different position today from what it was yesterday. And it will be in a different position again tomorrow. And sometimes you don't know where to look. Good morning. Gee, that was welcoming. Good morning.
Good morning.
That's better. Thank you. I've got a confession to make. I don't know anything about deer farming. But I hope that's okay, because I understand there's plenty of people in the room who do. But I do know a little bit about business, and I know some of the things that are driving business at the moment. And there's 3 words that keep sticking in my mind. I want those of you that are writing things down to write these 3 words down. They go like this. Nothing is... Anybody? Free? No. Well, true. Nothing's free, but true. Excuse me, I'll just rearrange the room. Nothing is impossible. It's definitely nothing's easy. Nothing is predictable. If I sat at your conference 3 or 4 years ago when oil was $110 a barrel and said to you, don't worry, oil's going to drop to $28 a barrel, and over the case of the next 4 or 5 years it'll recover to about 50, you probably would have thought I was a bit mad. But if I said at the same time that iron ore was going to drop from $180 a tonne down to 38 and claw its way back to 80 and drop to 42, and as a result of that the Australian economy would start tipping over, you'd certainly start thinking I was mad. And then even 12 months ago, if I said to you, by the way, the Brits are going to vote to leave the European Union, by then you've got the white coat out, right, and you've got people in an ambulance waiting outside to take me away. But the reality is, even in the last 12 months, the Brits have voted to leave the European Union. John Key resigned. None of us saw that coming, did we? Bill English, I think, was the only one who was ready for that one. And then, of course, the US had an election between Dumb and Dumber, and the winner was dumbest. Three weeks ago, the French voted a president who doesn't have a political party in. Nothing is predictable. Does that stuff affect our business? Do commodity prices and oil prices and political stability and economics affect our businesses? Can we do anything about them? We can't, can we? So there's all this sort of stuff going on out there that we can't control, but it affects our business. That's pretty unfair. Then in this country, we've got economists who seem to get more time in the newspapers and on the radio and on the television. You notice that? You notice how much time the economists get in our coverage? That little fellow, what's his name? Good way to, economists have predicted 18 of the last 3 recessions. You just got to think that every time you see one of them talking. You know that little fellow, the little Sri Lankan guy, what's his name? Bob Jones calls him Shambles. I wish I'd thought of that. Shamabel's Equab. He said 5 years ago, my wife and I have decided not to buy a house because they're overvalued. Right? You know what's happened to the housing prices in the last 5 years. They haven't got a clue. But they get all this time in the newspaper, all these column inches, more stuff we can't control. Good way to think about the economists. They're the people who are really good with numbers but don't have the personality to be accountants. Just think about that for a minute. So you got all this stuff going on there that we can't control, that's affecting our business. So what do we have to be really good at? Anybody? Change, adapting, risk management. We've got to be really good at the stuff that we can control. Does that make sense? Because we constantly see people rushing around getting strung out over stuff that they can't do anything about. If they spent that time focusing on the things that they can control, we'd get a better outcome for our businesses. So what are the things that we can control? So a few years ago, or many years ago now, 15 years ago or so, after I thought I'd finished corporate life, I made a comeback, which was silly, but anyway. I just sat down one day and sort of started challenging myself. What are the things that we can control? And I did it by writing down all the things that I'd done as a business manager. Everything at that time, from running a surf lifesaving club at the age of 17, right through to running Kerry Packer's magazine empire at the age of 40-something. And I just allowed myself one line for each thing. So a thing might have been raise money for a new inflatable rescue boat, or it might have been organise paid lifeguard roster, or it might have said sell a photocopier, or run a sales meeting, or fly to Melbourne and fire somebody you didn't want to fire. Whatever it was, just one line for each thing. And I ended up with 20 pages of one-liners, 30 items per page, 600 things that a manager does. And then I tried to categorise what those things are. And as it turns out, they're actually the things you can control, because they're the things you're doing. And I got everything eventually under 7 headings. And I call them the 7 principles of profit, which is really corny, right? But it was pretty cool in the early 2000s when I first came up with this. But those 7 things go like this. Number 1, dealing with change. Number 2, leadership. Number 3, finance in the back office. Number 4, your product or your service. Number 5, your sales and marketing function. Number 6, your people. And number 7, last but not least, anybody want to have a go? Number 7, classic New Zealand audience. Pardon? Me? Not quite. Your wife? Very good. Family? Did we miss somebody? Customers. I know wives and families and all that stuff are really important, but customers, when I'm at work. So those of you who are trying to write it down, dealing with change, leadership, finance in the back office, your product or your service, your sales and marketing, your people and your customers. And everything we do in business falls under one of those categories, one of those 7 headings. And in this country, we've got another challenge. We have a crisis in this country that doesn't get talked about. It's a crisis of attitude. I don't know if you've seen this morning's papers, but yet again, there's the headline, the budget didn't do anything for me. Budget never does anything for me, right? It's not what the budget's for. You notice how many news items you watch. If I'm a news hound, which is really hard with the news quality in this country, but you try to watch the news at night. There's all these people that are saying the government's got to fix this, that Kiwi attitude. You notice when you go across to Australia, you notice the attitude difference? Even the customs hall, right? The guy stamping your passport. Even he's got a smile on his face and he's upbeat and he's talking about his kids and he's happy and he's positive and he's loving life in Australia. We don't do that here, do we? We're all sort of a bit grisly. And we can't be. The Aussies any smarter than us? Gee, that was convincing. I think they're pretty stupid. I lived there for 3.5 years running Colliers. Let me tell you some of the things. We were losing over $1.5 million a year in the real estate company in Queensland. I don't know how you lose $1.5 million a year in Queensland, and I really wanted to find out. So I rang the chief of our general manager of our Queensland business one day. His name was Pat. I said, Pat, as you know, I'm coming up tomorrow for a couple of days. What's the plan? Do you want to pick me up at the airport? Do I get a cab into town to meet you? What do I do? How many of you have been to the domestic terminal in Brisbane? Most of you? Okay, follow me. This is what he said. He said, oh, look, it's really easy. You come out of the plane, you're on a mezzanine floor. He said, walk along the mezzanine floor, you get to an escalator, you go down the escalator. You with me? Those of you that have been there, you go down the escalator, bottom of the escalator, you turn a hard left. On the left-hand side, there's baggage claim. On the right-hand side, there's big double doors. Above the double doors, sign says taxis. He says, we've got an account at yellow cabs. Just get a yellow cab into town. What colour are the yellow cabs in Queensland? They're orange. That's how smart these people are. I had a meeting at a building in George Street, Sydney called Australia Square. Any of you been to Australia Square? What shape's Australia Square? It's a circle. And as you heard, I do a bit of swimming. I had a training swim in Melbourne one day at the Harold Holt Memorial Pool. It's the only swimming pool in the world named after a Prime Minister that drowned. And then, as you just heard, I worked for Mr. Packer for a number of years, where, among other things, we had a magazine called Australian Women's Weekly, which comes out once a month. Women's Day, which comes out weekly, and Fashion Quarterly, which comes out 6 times a year. So are the Aussies any smarter than us? No, they're not smarter than us. We're smarter than them, but they do have a better attitude. And that's what we've got to think about when we're going out and doing it. I know our jobs are hard, and I know farmers' jobs are real hard. That's why I'm a townie, right? Because it's too hard being out there doing what you guys are doing. But we do need to carry with us every day an attitude that says we're going out there today to be better, because better never stops. I have these moments that really influenced me. One was I was driving down the Southern Motorway in Auckland a number of years ago on my way to a meeting like this, which was being held in Taupo. And the meeting started about 8:30, so I left pretty early, and I'm on the road at 5 o'clock in the morning. If you guys will know what it's like at 5 o'clock in the morning trying to find something on the radio to listen to. And, you know, there's either something really loud and bad happening on Radio Hauraki that hour, or there's really weird people phoning talkback, and that's about the only options. And so I'm scouting around on the radio while I'm driving down the Southern Motorway trying to find something to listen to, and I found the BBC World Service. And they were interviewing a guy called Bill Gates. How many of you heard of a guy called Bill Gates? And Gates, doesn't matter whether he's speaking about malaria or software, he's brilliant. And this particular time he's talking about the fact that the federal government in Australia had charged Microsoft yet again with being anti-competitive, and they were going through a court case because of the way they bundled their assets or their products and all that sort of stuff. And in the middle of the conversation, Gates said something that made me, a guy that's always in a hurry and never stops, even if the person in the back seat wants to go to the bathroom, made me stop and write down what he said. And he was talking about the court case, and he said, what the Federal Justice Department don't understand is that if we don't keep changing, if we don't keep improving, if we don't keep innovating, then we'll go out of business. That's the richest man in the world talking. I happen to think that Microsoft about that time could have just stuck Windows 8 on the shelves and taken a holiday for 5 years and nobody would have noticed. But that's not how the richest man in the world thinks. And it's not a bad little one-liner for any business. And it's your first key phrase this morning. If we don't keep changing, if we don't keep improving, if we don't keep innovating, then we'll go out of business. I've been saying it slightly different and clearly not as well because Gates made more money than I did. I say you've got to be 20% better every year just to stay the same. 20% better every year just to maintain your relationship with your clients. 20% better every year just to maintain your production values, your production quality, whatever it is, whatever ways you measure your business. 20% better every year just to maintain your position. Think about my old business, the magazine business. How many of you bought a magazine in the last year? Okay. What made you buy the magazine? 9 times out of 10, what makes you buy a magazine? You walk into a shop or a newsstand and you buy a magazine because of what? The cover. 52% of the people who buy a magazine buy it because of what's on the cover. So you buy the magazine and you take it home and you read the cover story and it's fantastic. So you start reading the rest of the magazine and it's brilliant and you love it. And you end up reading the whole thing and it's really, really good. Do you tell anybody about it? Farmers, no. Don't tell anybody. If you have a good experience, you tell people, right? Are you more likely to buy the next magazine? Of course you are. Are you as reliant on what's on the cover? No, because you've had a good experience. And it's the same in business. You see, what we do in business is we go out and we're interacting with people all the time. And we go out and it's really, really good. And then we start telling people. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, but when you start telling people about good experiences, the experiences actually get better than they were. Have you ever noticed that? It's like, you know, you go to a test match and you sit in the stand, you watch a test match, you say, what a great game. Then you go to the pub afterwards and you're talking with all your mates, you're talking up the game, and then you watch it on TV the next day, it wasn't that good. Ever notice that? So you talk it up. The more you talk about something, you talk it up. And it's the same with the people we interact with right across business. Every time we interact with people, we are setting or resetting their expectations of us. And if they go away and say, hey, I met this guy today and he was fantastic, then you better be just as good next time. Because he's talked you up and his expectations of you have grown and developed as a result. And I'm constantly bumping into people who aren't meeting the expectations that they set the last time I saw them. And in the commercial area, it's we prepare extensively to win new business, and then go along for the first review and sort of do our preparation at the traffic lights by flicking through the file. You've got to be, and it's your next key phrase, you've got to be 20% better every year just to stay the same. 20% better every year just to maintain your position. Organisations only fail for one of two reasons. I don't know if you've noticed that. The first one's the obvious one. It's a lack of appropriate financial management and control. That's kind of obvious, right? That's one reason. The other reason is what I call a lack of clarity of purpose. A lack of being clear about what you're trying to achieve. A lack of being clear about what your priorities are every day. How many of you heard of a guy called General Norman Schwarzkopf? Remember Schwarzkopf? He was the Allied commander in what I call Gulf War I. I think we're up to 47 or 48 now. And it was the first, you might remember, it was the first televised war. It was the first war that CNN went along riding with the troops and filming everything. So every night after the day's war effort, Schwarzkopf was on television right around the world being interviewed about the fighting that day. So he became something of a sort of a famous worldwide general person. And after he retired from the army, he went on a speaking tour, and he came to New Zealand and went to Australia. Did any of you see him? He did this outstanding presentation on leadership. He spoke for an hour, and he's a huge guy, right? He's about 6'5", 20 stone, square, Even in a suit, he's intimidating. I'd hate to see what he's like in a uniform. But he gave this really good presentation on leadership. And at the end of the presentation, unlike most celebrity-style speakers, he took questions from the audience. So all the guys started asking questions, right? Guys, do you want to imagine what sort of questions he was asked? How many tanks you have, how many guns you have, how much money do you spend on ammunition, how many people you kill, why didn't you go all the way into Baghdad and kill the sucker, etc., etc., etc. And then a tiny little woman in the middle of 3,000 people in the audience stood up and asked a question. And she said, General, how do you run a team of 800,000 people? Brilliant. See, guys, we don't think like that, do we? How do you run a team of 800,000 people? And I'll never forget his answer. He said, 800,000 people was easy. You see, we only had one goal, to kick Iraq out of Kuwait. And that's exactly how he said it, with the hand action, like he'd said it 100 times before. And then I realised he had, every morning, at every briefing, to kick Iraq out of Kuwait. So he said, if we had problems, and he said, we had all sorts of problems. We had transport problems, logistics problems, colour of the vehicle problems, sand problems, diet problems, religious problems. Those problems didn't matter unless they affected our ability to kick Iraq out of Kuwait. And he said every single person on that 800,000 person team had a little card. And that little card said, our mission, you can join in now if you like, to kick Iraq out of Kuwait. And that's clarity of purpose. So what are you trying to achieve? And it doesn't have to be a flash slogan like that. What are the 2 or 3 or 4 key things, the key bullet points, the key priorities, the things that you go back to every day, the things that you go back to when you've got that 5-minute moment where nothing's going on? What are those things? What are those 3 or 4 big priorities? Because a business without clarity of purpose is a business that flounders. Any of you from the Canterbury area? A few of you? I did a review of the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority about 3 years. I'm glad the minister's gone. I can talk like this. Nobody from the media here, is there? I did a review 3 years after Sarah was set up. Somebody looking around at the media? Three years after Sarah was set up, I was asked to do a review because they weren't getting much traction. I was in Christchurch yesterday. As you can see, they still haven't got the traction they should have got. My own view is that Christchurch is our national disgrace, but anyway, I'll put that to one side. And I sat down on the first day of the review with the management team, the 12 people in the room, and I said, and I was introduced, and the leader of the discussion talked about what I was there to do. And he said, do you have any questions, Bruce? And I said, I've just got one. Can you tell me what we're trying to achieve? And I went around the room. How many different answers do you think I got? That's a sign of a dysfunctional organisation. The first thing I will say to you, if you come to talk to me about your business, I'll say, what are you trying to achieve? Because clarity, being clear about what you're trying to achieve, and it's your next key phrase, be clear about what you're trying to achieve. Clarity makes decision-making easy. Straight away, you know what's important and what's not, if you're clear about what you're trying to achieve. If you're not clear about what you're trying to achieve, if you just turn up every day and goof around, you know what happens? Everything that comes across your phone or your desk or comes to you, you have to think about. Because you don't know what you're doing, so everything's important. Does that make sense? But as soon as you're clear about what you're trying to achieve, you can dismiss half that stuff. Right? The clearer you are about what you're trying to achieve, the easier it is to know what's important, the more likely you are to have a successful business. Now, I'm very conscious that you guys have been sitting down for about an hour and a quarter. So how about you stand up? Just to stretch your legs. And while you're standing up, I just want you to think of a song. Any song? Got a song in your head? And when you've thought of a song, can you just start singing your song? Away you go. Away you go.
Assumes you can sing.
I thought your good morning effort was bad. Okay, is there anybody having a birthday today? Yesterday? Tomorrow? Hey guys, I know you've got an agenda. I've got all day. Anybody having a birthday this week? Last week, you're in. Come on up. How you going? I'm Bruce.
I'm Ali.
Ellie, how you going, Ellie? Could you just stand up on that stage just so as everybody can see you? This is Ellie. This is Ellie, everybody. She had her birthday last week.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you very
Sorry I
much.
didn't bring a present.
No, it's all right.
On the count of three, we're going to sing happy birthday to Ellie. Is that all right? Does everybody know the words? Have we got any Aussies in the audience? No? Okay. On the count of three. 1, 2, 3. Well done. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ellie. Happy birthday.
Thank
You can
you
sit
very
down
much.
now. You guys can all sit down now. So what's the point of that? The point of that is that I had a bet with a mate that I could get 100 farmers in a room to stand up and sing a song. No, that's not really the point of it, actually. I just thought of that. So did you see first time around you all got up and you sort of muffled and shuffled and put your heads down because you're dead scared I was going to pick you out because you're New Zealanders and you're scared you're going to be picked out of the audience. And then the second time around you actually sang something and it sounded okay. Wasn't perfect, but it sounded okay and you started on time and you knew what to sing and you finished on time. And that's a room full of people who know what they're trying to do. But you know, most people go to work every day and do what you did first time. Most people go to work every day and guess. Most people go to work every day and do what they think they're meant to do. And if you want to be really, really successful, one of the things you can do, and I know a number of you employ small teams of people, is get them going to work every day and doing what they know they're meant to do. That way you get them singing the same song that you're singing. You ever heard the term singing from the same hymn sheet? Instead of turning up and guessing. Communicate, communicate, communicate. That's the next sort of hobby horse. I talk to people all the time about clarity, communicate, consistency. Be clear about what you're trying to achieve, communicate it relentlessly, and act in a manner that's consistent with what you're trying to achieve. Make sure all your actions are consistent with that. Communicate, communicate, communicate. The thing about communication is most people don't like surprises. People will tell you they like surprises. You ever heard that? I love surprises, right? People actually like nice surprises, right? If I come up to you and say, hey, Andy, I've got $40 million in my pocket, you just won lotto, you'd probably like me. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But if I came up to you and said, I'm from the bank, you probably didn't see this coming, but I've come to take the keys of your farm, you'd probably hate me.
Oh, yeah.
Right now?
Yeah.
Right now, maybe I can have it.
Yeah, absolutely. You're an arsehole.
I can't say that with the microphone on, but I know what you mean, right? So people like nice surprises, but they don't like surprises. And the role that communication plays in any business, in any organisation, whether your target of the communication is your customer, your employee, your husband, your wife, your bank manager, your key suppliers, your key marketing arm, whatever it is, communication fills that gap between them liking you and hating you. In fact, if we've got to get bad news out, communication is the difference between people tolerating the communication and totally disliking the communication. And I call that the communication gap. And we've got to be so much better at communicating with everybody we do business with. And again, Kiwis, we're not natural communicators. Right? We put our head down and we muffle like we did when I asked you to sing a song in front of everybody. Right? Communicate, communicate, communicate. And there's only one rule on communication that works, and this is your next key phrase. Always assume the message doesn't get through. In other words, you've got to say the same thing over and over and over and over again. Winston Peters is brilliant at it, right? You don't agree with what he says, but immigration, 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 repetition, repetition, repetition. Right? Always assume. So you're constantly delivering the same messages. And again, that's easier if you're clear about what you're trying to achieve. How many of you heard of Generation X? How many of you heard of Generation Y? How many heard of Generation F? Nobody. No recognition. Because there's a group of people in our workforces now, they're now 40% of our workforce, and by 2025, they'll be 75% of our workforce. And they think differently to us. We gave them a label, we call them millennials. I call them Generation F. It's not what you think. They're the Facebook generation. What do we know about the Facebook generation? Not much. I didn't say what do we think about them, I said what do we know about them. They communicate differently. They're connected. They're impatient. Have you heard that one? They can't wait. They always want a promotion. They always want more money. They're the me generation. You heard all that stuff? But they're different, right? Always got their phone in their hand. Totally different. You notice what they do with the photos? Right now, my son's here in Wellington at university. My daughter's in Auckland. She's got a real job now and nearly off the payroll. But I'm in Wellington, and I've seen the photos from her at the gym this morning. Right? They're permanently engaged in everything they're doing. Notice that? Everything. If they're having dinner, they take a photo of it and tell their 800 friends, I'm having dinner. Well, so what? So is everybody else about 7 o'clock at night, right? But they have to tell everybody and they have to show they're permanently engaged. If they're athletes, I'm the chairman of swimming in New Zealand for my sins. I must have done something bad in a previous life. And our swimmers, our top swimmers, they know all their competitors around the world, right? And they know where they are and who's training and who's injured and who's at physio because they've got them on Find Friends or whatever else it might be. They're permanently engaged. My son's a basketball nut. He's an absolute basketball nut. He's one of those kids in the house who run from one end of the house to the other to say, Dad, 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 guess what? And I say, what? And he'll say, LeBron James just scored 50 points. Woohoo. But, that's him. He came to me the other day. He was home for the holidays. He said, Dad, 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 guess what? I said, what? Thinking one of those. He said, my new basketball shoes have left the factory and they're on the way to the courier. Right? So he's following the basketball shoes stage by stage, 5 days from Beavertown in Oregon to Auckland, right? Permanently engaged in everything they do, except for what? Work. And here's the point. Guess who created those people? We did. We took them to school in the car. Some of us even walked them to the classroom. Many of us carried their bags for them. And when they were 10, we gave them a mobile phone in case something happened, they could call us. And then every time they asked a question, guess what we did? We answered it. My father, I used to ask my father questions. Don't need a standard answer. Don't even know about that, son. Remember that answer? And then that was usually followed by something along the lines of children should be seen and not heard. Remember that? We didn't do that to the millennials, did we? We've answered every question. And if we couldn't answer it, guess what? They've been able to find out the answer. So these people have lived this life, and then they get to work, and the boss walks past them in the morning and doesn't say good morning. And you know what they think? I've done something wrong. I do sessions for some of the big corporates, and I call it 30 under 30. We put 30 of their young people in a room and talk to them about the way the chiefs communicate with them. Just totally off the chart. Chalk and cheese. Somebody walks past them, doesn't say hello, or doesn't explain why what they've asked them to do is important and that's the real thing, they don't get it. Or if they've done something that's not right and we make a note of that and tell them 6 months later, do you know what they think? They think that old bugger's been carrying a grudge for 6 months. Because they live in an instant world. So if they make a mistake or they do something wrong or they do something that's not the way we want it done, you know what we've got to do? We've got to say, hey, Charlie, come over here. You know, yesterday I asked you to do that thing and you didn't quite do it how I wanted it done, and I just want to go through it with you again so as you don't make the same mistake again. They can cope with that. They're really good. They're much better at dealing with that than our generation. But what they can't cope with is you waiting 6 months to tell them they did something wrong. Make sense? So you've got to engage these people because they're the growing part of our workforce. So how do you do that? I'm not saying you've got to send them a text message every 2 minutes just to keep them engaged, right? What you do have to do is give them permission, give them scope, and give them an involvement to enable them to engage themselves. And that's your next key phrase. Give Generation F permission, scope, and involvement. So if you tell them you want them to do something, give them the whole job, not a piece of it. Tell them why the job's important. Tell them how that job relates to what it is you're trying to achieve in the business and how that job relates to their contribution to your business. If they understand that, they are fantastic. They won't do it the way you would have done it because they actually know better ways to do things, right? So don't expect them to do it the same way, but give them the permission and the scope and the involvement to get out there and do it themselves. Does that make sense? Okay. I had to get that. Finance. 3 things on money. You've got to make good decisions running any business, and financial information is the key to making good decisions. And I'm not saying you've got to be a techie who slaves over spreadsheets all day long, but there are 3 things that I think every business needs to have and every businessman needs to have at their fingertips all the time. And number 1 of those is good quality financial information that comes out every month or every week or whatever your reporting cycle is on a timely basis. And if it's more than a week past the end of the month, it's too slow. So if you're getting your financial information from your accountant or your partner or whoever's doing it for you and it's taking 5 weeks to get last month's numbers out, it's too long. You've got to get financial information out quickly. The second thing you've got to do is you've got to have budgets. And people say to me all the time, budgets are a waste of time, they're always wrong. Of course they're wrong. They're predictions. Remember what I said about economists making predictions? Predictions are usually wrong. But the idea of a budget is it gives you something to track your business against. You should have 2 columns on every financial piece of paper that you've got. One is alongside the column that says this is how we're doing. One is this is how we're doing this time last year, and one says that this is our budget. And your budget tells you if you're on track. And then the third, and with budgets, if you've got a big organisation and you've got various people that are responsible for different parts of the budget, make sure those people had a say in creating the budget. You know, the number of organisations of any type that I've walked into and I've said, hey, why are we so far off budget? And the guy says, don't talk to me about the budget. I didn't set it. Right? I had nothing to do with the budget. Heard that conversation? Right? The budget's got to be committed to by the people that are responsible for helping you achieve it. Gee, that's complicated. Right? But businesses don't do it. And number 3, forecast. Constantly reforecast your business. As things are changing, and in your industry, everything's changing all the time. Right? Climate changes things. Availability of other commodity product overseas changes things. International pricing's changing things. Constantly revise your forecast. Have your budget column and saying that's what we thought we were going to do, but now XYZ's changed and we can only do that. Or now we're going to do that. And constantly be looking at the reforecast position for your business. And you know what that takes out? Surprises. Because we don't like surprises, do we? Right? That takes out the surprises. If you know if the product price, commodity price is tanking on the other side of the world and you know you're going to have to make some adjustments, best you make them as soon as you know that the price is tanked. Don't say, oh no, don't worry about the price, here's my budget. Right? That won't work for you, will it? So financial information prepared on time, budgets agreed to by those responsible for helping you achieve it, even if they're third parties. You know, there might be third-party sales and marketing people. You might sit down with them and say, hey, I'm doing a budget. What do you think we're looking at next year? Get their input. and forecasts, constantly reforecasting your business. I want to talk a little bit about customers. You guys are unique. You think you're unique because you've got two sets of customers. So you've got the end consumer, the person who buys your product, and then you've got the middleman. But you're not unique because radio stations have 3 customers, magazine publishers have two sets of customers. We have the people that buy the magazines, the people that read them. We have advertisers who want something totally different to what the other two want. So there's a lot of businesses where you have more than one set of customers, and you've got to treat them all like they're the most important person in the world. I live in a big white weatherboard house, and it's an old house. It's sort of built in the 50s, and it's been added on to. The last big add-on was me. I did that one. But I've been in that house for 18 years. And in 18 years, I've had, what sort of tradesman do you think would really like my house? Big, white weatherboard with those little crisscrossy windows, you know, that take painters. Painters love my house, right? So in 18 years, I've had painters in about 6 times. Because, you know, even though we mortgaged everything in our lives to buy the thing, my wife ripped the horrible wallpaper off on the first day and decided we needed to get painters in. And then the ceiling collapsed because the shower upstairs was leaking, so we had to get painters in. Then we redid the kids' rooms, we had to get painters in, you get the idea. And over time you keep... So we had painters in 6 times. And then we did the big renovation where the whole thing got repainted, outside and in. How many of those painters do you think we had back more than once? No, none. You know why? Couldn't find them. They're probably busy out looking for work, right? But we couldn't find, they all just move on, you can't find them. So we get a 7th guy in to do the renovation. This is the $80,000 paint job. And a new guy got that. We were quite happy with the others, but they just weren't around. So the new guy got the job. How many of you have lived through a renovation? It's pretty stimulating stuff, isn't it? What's the best day of the renovation? The last one. Who's the last guy to leave? The painter. So this guy does it a bit differently. He rings me about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and he said, Bruce, it's Daryl here. I just thought I'd let you know we've finished. It looks fantastic. Give us a call if you see anything that needs tarting up, but hopefully you'll be happy. That was on a Thursday. On the Sunday, he rang me. How's your weekend been? He knew that I worked on a Sunday night. I always sit at my desk on a Sunday night and plan the week. He said, how's your weekend been? I said, good. He said, how's the painting? Is it all okay? I said, yeah, it looks fantastic. He said, do you mind if I send the invoice through? I said, no, go ahead. So he sends the invoice through. 3 weeks later, he rings me. Hey, I just wanted to thank you for paying on time. 3 months later, he rings me. He says, we're going to be down in Takapuna tomorrow pricing another job. I just wonder if you're happy for us to drop in and have a look around and see if anything needs touching up. And then a year later, he rings me. And he says, you're not going to believe this, but it's a year since we left. Do you mind if I drop in sometime over the next week and have a look? And if there's anything needs touching up or tarting up, we'll do it free of charge. I've bought $150,000 motor vehicles and not had that sort of follow-up. Right? I've bought houses and not had that sort of follow-up. How long do you think it took him to make those 5 phone calls? 10 minutes in a year. He spent 10 minutes in a year. And here's the point. Good customer service isn't a cost. Good service of all of the people you're interacting with out there takes very little time, and the returns are huge. It's actually a revenue opportunity. How many people do you think I've recommended that painter to in the last 3 years? And here's the thing about painters. You know, a good painter needs 40, if a painter wants to make 100 grand a year for 40 years, he needs 40 clients like me in his life. Because even in the 20 years in that house, I'll spend $100,000 on paint. But you can never find them because they're out looking for work. So that's your key phrase, your next key phrase, right? Good customer service generates revenue. It's not a cost. I've got 8 things a customer wants that I'm going to quickly run through with you. Number 1, rapid response. We live in a world of microwave ovens and mobile phones and all that sort of stuff, and we're surrounded by millennials. Everybody's instant. Does that make sense? How many of you have told the microwave to hurry up? Ever done that? How many of you have taken the mobile phone to the bathroom? right? We do that, don't we? Because we can't bear not to be in contact. So if somebody's left a message for you to call, doesn't matter whether they're a supplier, a customer, a partner, and you leave it for 4, 5, 6 hours, what do you think they're thinking in that instant world? So rapid response, number one. Number two, proactive. We've actually got to drive the process, right? We've got to be constantly driving the process, because you just heard the minister say, you guys have got to get in front of us, otherwise we forget you're here. Did you hear him say that? Right? You've got to be proactively driving the process. There's so much noise out there in the world, unless you're in front of people, they're not thinking about you, right? So proactive, number two. Number three, be accurate. Because if I'm busy and you're throwing stuff at me and it's wrong, I discard you like a suitcase, right? You're all over, gone. So be accurate with your information. Number four, communicate. Constantly tell me what's going on. If I'm engaged in a process with you in some way, shape or form, we've got to be constantly talking to each other, constantly communicating. Because again, that world we're living in, if you say, hey, I'm going to get back to you on Wednesday, and Wednesday comes and goes and you don't, I go to bed that night thinking either, well, he's a tosser, he didn't get back to me, or why hasn't he got back to me, or is something wrong, right? Where all you actually had to do was make one of those 2-minute phone calls and say, hey, Bruce, I know I was meant to get back to you today, but I haven't got the information yet, it's going to take another couple of days. And you can do that in a voice message, because 60% of our telephone calls are actually voice messages. We don't even have to talk to people now. It's wonderful, right? Ring them up. If you really hate talking to people, ring them at 5:30 in the morning, just leave 25 messages for people, then go out and get on with your day, right? But communicate. Next one, number 5. I've lost track of where I am now. I'm all over the place. Assistance with the process. Help me with the decision. Help me with what we're trying to do. We need all sides around the table helping to get to the outcome. I want an enjoyable experience. That's number 6. Because you know what? We actually work with people we like. We work best with people we like. So make it enjoyable. Have a bit of fun along the way. Number 7, trust. I have to be able to trust you. And whatever it is we're trying to do, number 8, let's get an outcome. Let's get an outcome that everybody's happy with. Hey, I've dumped a whole lot of stuff on you today. How many of you, now that some of you have been really good at taking notes, I love doing this to people, how many of you would like me to send you a copy of the notes? All right. Well, if you want a copy of the notes, Privacy Act and all that, Dan can't give me a list of email addresses. You have to come and give me a business card or write it down on a piece of paper or something. Give me your email address. Spell your name clearly, because Mrs. Cottrell is actually the person who puts these into the computer, and she can't read all of your writing, so spell clearly, or if you've got a business card, give me a card, and I'll send you the notes in a week. I'm not going to send you the notes tomorrow, because tomorrow you'll still remember what I'm talking about. But in a week you won't. You see, you'll have forgotten it. You'll go back to the farm and you'll have all sorts of stuff going on, and they'll say, Bruce who? Right? So I'm going to send it to you in a week when you've just stopped thinking about this stuff, and it'll be a nice little reminder of all the things you were going to do. But I've dumped all this stuff on you, and you've got a whole day of people dumping stuff on you, and then you're going to go back to the farm after this, or back to your workplace, and all those emails and all those phone calls and all those things you've got to do are going to be mounted up, and there's a risk that you forget about the stuff that we've talked about, or you forget to do something different. And all I ask for as a result of these presentations is you go away and have a go at doing something different. Go away and try stuff. And I know you can, because as you heard in the intro, I'm a sports nut. And as a sports nut, I've been to some of the best sporting events in the world. I've followed the British Open. I've followed people like Severiano Ballesteros when he was alive, and Nick Faldo and John Daly playing golf. I've been to a couple of Formula Ones, which are fantastic. I met Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello. I've seen the All Blacks win a couple of World Cups. I've done triathlons and half marathons around the world. My legs are too broken to run a full marathon, saves you asking me that question afterwards. And I had fantastic sporting experiences all around the world. I've visited all except 2 Olympic stadiums, and I've swum in all except 2 Olympic pools that have hosted the Olympics since I was born. And on one of those trips, I had a sporting experience that stands above all of those others. And it was in 1992, and my wife and I were visiting Barcelona 3 weeks after the Olympics. And we're just looking around the Olympic Stadium, and there are all these people there. So we went over to the little kiosk to find out what was going on. Turned out the Paralympics were going on. So for just 10 New Zealand dollars each, we had a day at the track and field at the Paralympics with 30,000 people in the Olympic Stadium we'd just seen on television 3 weeks earlier, with the Olympic flame burning at one end, and watched heroes, one-legged high jumpers, one-armed discus throwers, wheelchair athletes for the day. One of those days you're just a bit moist around the eyes all day. Unbelievable. And in the middle of all of those events, one event stood out and got me, still gets me when I talk about it. It was the 100-metre sprint final for the totally visually impaired. Blind people running 100 metres just as fast as they can. And the funny thing about the 100 metres for the blind is they run them one at a time, which is kind of obvious when you think about it. How can you laugh at that? And everybody runs from lane 4, and they run against the clock. The other funny thing about the 100 metres for the blind is every athlete has a helper, and the helper either runs alongside them attached by a leather strap like you see in the marathons, or the helper stands down by the finish line and yells or yodels their special call, so as the athlete can hear where to go as they wind their way down the track. The other funny thing about the 100 metres for the blind is the 30,000 people in the Olympic Stadium with the Olympic flame burning at one end are asked to do the opposite of what they want to do. They're asked to be quiet. And folks, the winner that day ran the 100 metres just 1 second slower than Linford Christie did 3 weeks earlier when he won the Olympic gold medal. And he took 4 lanes of track to do it. And if he can do that, then you can do whatever you set your hearts and minds on. So go out there, don't be afraid to change things, be the best that you can be, and do everything you can to put deer farming in New Zealand on an even higher stage than it currently is. Thank you so much for having me.